It's time to grow up. For Christians who are afraid to speak out specifically, there are going to be people who hate us, and it's not supposed to be easy. I could be much further along in my music career right now. I know that. I know that I'm an amazing composer. I work with orchestras and different things all over the world and a great songwriter. But I know that part of the reason why I'm not as far in it as I would like to be is because of that. They look and they see some Israel post or something and they go, I don't want to be associated with them. And that has to be okay. Your goal in life has to be to walk out whatever mission God gave you. And so if you know what's going on is just rank and foul, and the people who are following Tucker and Candace and all these influencers, and they're wrong, and you choose not to speak out, that's on you.
Many of you may remember our interview with Pastor Dumisani Washington, one of the strongest Christian voices standing with Israel. Today, I'm honored to welcome his son, Joshua Washington, who has become a leading Christian voice defending Israel around the world. We'll discuss Israel, October 7th, the future of Christian Zionism, his family's powerful story, and why he continues to stand for truth despite tremendous personal loss. Joshua, welcome to our show.
Thank you, Daniel. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Joshua, of all the causes that you could dedicate your life to, why Israel, and why is Israel worth fighting for?
Well, it started it really was something that was always a fascination of my father's, and it's something that he, taught us as we grew up, things about not just Israel, but even as Christians, knowing the roots, the roots of our faith, and that understanding that if it wasn't for the Jewish faith, we would not have a faith. And going from there, I think you just growing up in a household where, he taught me music, he taught me a lot of things. I was just drawn to the things that he would write about and speak about and talk to us about. So it was something that was kind of, I would say, taken on by me specifically when it came to the work that he was doing. And, it became its own fire inside of me especially when I went to college and I started to see some of the lies and misconceptions, some of the propaganda that was affecting my college campus in just small ways. And and as someone who was able to grow up and meet people that I think most people wouldn't be able to meet, and just in environments where I was able to be a fly on the wall and just learn things, I felt it was my responsibility to speak up when things like that would happen. So that would happen here and there. And then it really turned into me having this desire as well to share what I know, and then to do it through music as well. So a lot of my music has that wrapped up in it, and being able to travel around the world and share my music and share my story and share all of this together really does. It's something that I see as a very integral part of who I am as a person. And yeah, I couldn't see myself not advocating for Israel and just sharing and showing the humanity in Israel, just by simply going and playing, and, having very close friends out there. And, you know, it's, yeah, it's a duty, but it's also, it's a pleasure, it really is.
Now, you mentioned that if it wasn't for your father, you might have believed many of the anti-Israel narratives, the propaganda on campus that are common today. How close were you to believing them? Maybe take us through that journey of
Yeah.
when these beliefs went from being your father's to actually being your own.
Well, there were always moments of where I was confronted with what I would now call a lie about Israel. But at the time, I would take things at face value. I would absorb them, and I would do research on it because, at the time around 2009, 2010, when I was sophomore, junior in college, it's, the first time that I saw an event posted on, I was a conservatory student. I would go into the piano rooms to practice. I walked to the piano building, and on the bulletin was this poster about raising funds for children in Gaza who are, victims of Israeli bombing and the genocide and all that stuff. And that was my first time seeing all those words, and really, that was honestly my first time really kind of like being aware of modern Israel, like I knew it was there, but I didn't realize it was so controversial and tense. And so I didn't really know what to think in the moment. but in my mind, like, okay, well, if this is true, then I want to be, I feel like I want to be a part of this, but let me see how true it is. You know what I mean? So like, I started kind of doing research, and that's when about a year, so that would happen, and I would just find out things for myself, either by talking with my dad or really sometimes on my own, just like this is the main accusation. Wow, is this really happening? And then starting to get the patterns, right? Starting to see, one of the things that we teach, that me and my late wife used to teach now, is how to read between the lines, how to read article titles, headlines, and like what's missing, what's the context that's missing. How do you even know if something is missing or something could be missing, and how they're wording things. But back then I didn't know any of that. I was just very honestly wanting to be on the right side of history. And so I would just do research to see, okay, how true is this? And so it happened again. So 2009 was when it first happened, but it happened again in 2012, right as I was graduating. After I graduated, I took an extra journalism class. I'd taken one more class. I was short a couple of credits. So I took a journalism class, and on my final paper, I wrote about retractions. And the paper was about the lie that continues to go around about Ethiopian Israelis, and quote unquote sterilization. And I remember seeing the evolution of that. Like, first it was reported that Ethiopian Israelis were being sterilized, and then there was a retraction, and the same publication that said we missed that. That was wrong. That's not what's going on. But to this day, no one really knows about the retraction. Everyone still shares the original article. And so I wrote a paper about why it's just dangerous to report on your feelings, and how even if you try to make it right, the damage is already done. But that was something that affected me very deeply, because when I first saw the article, again, my first reaction was, what's happening? Is this really true? Whereas I noticed as I got older that a lot of my peers, that wasn't usually the response. The response was usually just to respond emotionally. This is terrible. How could Israel do this? And so seeing that in real time, I tried to my best, and with just my friends really, to help kind of steer in a different direction. Like, okay, yes, that is terrible if that's actually happening, but this is why it's actually not happening. And yeah, that from those things, once I graduated, really felt more of a confidence to speak publicly. I would write, articles, and then I, for me, it was being able to meet people, to actually read books, and like, things like that. And then just experiencing these things on my own, and then meeting people in Israel, and actually having conversations about things happening on the ground, that, my news site is saying this, but then I have a friend I call, and she's like, well, that's not quite what's happening here. Here's more nuance. And realizing that, wow, I don't think everyone has really the privilege of just having a friend in Israel, or having friends out there who can speak to what's happening on the ground. So those things really made it a personal thing for me as well. Mm,
Now, at what point did you take your first trip to Israel, and what did you expect beforehand, and what did you
yeah.
experience?
My first trip was 2016. My first and second trip were actually both in 2016. And I was just excited to go. I mean, I didn't know what to expect really, except for what I knew, and what I learned about. And from at this point, I had, quite a few friends out there. And I went with my mother and father, and I, along with a few other musicians. We went with this other group called it was a band called the Wild Branches. And my dad had his own group, and there were some songs that we did in my dad's group that they would do with us together. So we all went on a tour together, and it was a tour, like an educational tour, but we also did a couple, I think two different concerts, and it was so life changing. I mean, one of the things, there was a song that I had written about the Jewish diaspora called "From the Farthest Horizon." And I wrote it years ago I had a folk band that I was writing for, but we had adapted it for like a more of like a bigger type of gospel sound. And we we I remember being in one of the hotels in Jerusalem, and there was a piano in the middle of the lobby, and my dad sat down at the piano, and we started singing, and then he went into that song, and we all sang that together. And I remember, still to this day, I'm standing there just looking around and looking out the windows and saying, wow, we are in Jerusalem singing this song, about the return of the Jewish people to this land. And we're standing on the land right now, in the holy city. I mean, I'll never forget that. And that was my first time going there. No expectations, but man, like, even if I had, I think it would have exceeded them greatly. It was such a great time. And another concert we did was on a kibbutz. So we were on a kibbutz. They had a nice stage up there, and there were just families all over the place. We started playing, and then kids just ran all the way up to the front of the stage and danced the whole time. I mean, that was a special night, just under the stars doing music. It was a great time. It really was.
Now, of course, there's many lies going around about Israel. One of the lies is apartheid, which people still believe in 2026. But what did you experience when you were there in terms of that?
Yeah, nothing close. I mean, it was the thing that's so frustrating is how that goes around so much. People throw around, I mean, and apartheid and all those buzzwords, people use them so much that they don't have meaning anymore. Like unfortunately, there are things like that actually happening around the world. But when everything's apartheid, nothing is. But, every time I go to Israel, I mean, it's very obvious how diverse Israel is. That's first of all, and how integrated everyone is, right? I didn't grow up under apartheid, but my late wife, her family, my in-laws, they did, and we would talk about that quite a bit, like how when they when they first went to Israel, they were looking for signs of apartheid because they grew up under apartheid. They got it, and they were like, "There's nothing even close to resembling that." I mean, and then also growing up as someone who knows his own history in America, my grandparents, like their parents, that there was never a time when I felt like an outsider because of my skin color. Every place I went to where I saw quote unquote white Jews, I saw black Jews, I saw Jews, there were Jews, and they saw each other as Jews, right? Not to say that there's never any kind of problems, but I tell people all the time, I used to say, Israel's not a perfect country, but I said, I'm tired of saying that. No country is perfect. That's first of all. But secondly, Israel is an amazing country, but Israel is a country, and any country will have interpersonal problems, right? That is not apartheid. Those are just issues. And those are issues that what I find some of the most patriotic Israelis that I know are Ethiopians, Ethiopian Israelis, Ethiopian Jews. The fact that, I mean, we've talked about this all the time, the fact that you have an Arab judge who can sentence a Jewish man to prison, that's not even you would not even have a black judge in apartheid South Africa, but let alone a black judge sentencing a white man to prison. That'd be unthinkable. It was illegal to even romantically be involved with someone of a different skin color than you. And you don't see any of that. Whenever I talk to my friends in Israel, it's mostly, I would say maybe like 70 to 80% of the time, the husband and wife have completely different backgrounds. One is from Iraq, the other one's from Yemen, or one is Ashkenazi, the other one is, from Ethiopia or whatever, and their families are mixed, and it's a huge melting pot. I don't, and so that accusation, it gets thrown around by obviously propagandists, but then it gets received by hyper emotional people who, maybe they want to make a difference in the world, but it's sad because not only is it not true, but again, it cheapens the actual suffering happening around the world greatly.
Now, where were you when you first heard about October 7th? What went through your mind? Did it change your message in any way, or did it just prove everything you knew all along?
So on October 7th, I was in Reno, Nevada. I was about to play a festival. It was morning time. I woke up in the morning. My late wife, Olga, was actually landing in Israel. It was something completely different. She was invited to an event to receive an award. All the work she had done over the years, all the speaking, all the advocacy, she was a powerhouse. And so she was invited. And as her plane was landing, it kept circling around, and she felt like something was wrong, but she said the pilot went and let them know what was happening. They just said, "Oh, we can't land right now. We're just give us some time. We're trying to figure it out." So then she texted the family and said, "We're not landing. I'm not sure what's going on." And that's how we found out Israel's under attack. And obviously, so now she's in Israel. I'm in Nevada. My kids are with my parents. Our kids with their parents. And so now I'm just feeling a little bit freaked out because I'm about to play a show, for a festival. But what is this show? I mean, I don't even care about the show anymore. Like, I want my wife to be okay. So we got a chance to talk, and she said, "It's okay. Do your show. It's fine. You're gonna be fine. Everything's gonna be fine." And she couldn't leave right away. The flights were not just going in and out after that. So she stayed for about 4 days, I believe, and she actually was able to link up with a very very close friend of hers, and they were able to help get women and children basically out of Israel in that time that she was there, and also like terminally ill patients, people who basically weren't able to fight, helped them to get out to safety. Then she was able to come home, and for me, in terms of advocacy, the only thing that it really changed. So in 2021, during that war that happened, where like over 5,000 rockets were fired into Israel, we what we noticed that was that every time Israel was at war, the PR war would get even worse out here in the West. And so in 2021, we realized that this is the worst it's ever been. I mean, it was Jews were being attacked all over the world. They were being chased home, beat up. It was in Canada, it was in LA, Philly, Germany, everywhere, everywhere. People who just looked Jewish, or maybe they spoke Hebrew, maybe they were wearing a kippah, something like that, and they were being attacked. And so we knew that, okay, this is going to get worse. We didn't know what was going to happen, but just looking at what happened in 2021, it's like, this can't be good. This is going downhill fast. So October 7th still shocked us. The only thing that changed for me was that, what I would do, I had two different platforms. One was more Israel focused and one was more music focused, with a little bit of Israel in there. But what I started to do immediately actually was, from my music Substack page, I wrote just a personal note about my wife being in Israel right now for October 7th. I wanted to humanize everything. Like I saw the celebrations. I saw people celebrating the attacks in New York and in the Bay Area, and I saw that. And at first, I wanted to write something more academic. Write something. I was like, no, I want you guys. First of all, how about we all just calm down for a second? Like you guys love me, right? My wife is stuck there, so can we just stop with all of our free Palestine BS and remember that these are human beings and women and children and innocent families that are getting slaughtered right now. This isn't even a war. It's just an attack. So from there, for those next 2 years, pretty much every one of my articles I wrote from that music Substack was about Israel and all the aspects, everything from how the black community was manipulated in the 60s to what's happening in Gaza and how Hamas controls the narrative, everything. Because I saw what I saw was a lot of artists who were speaking about something they knew nothing about. And being in the artist space, I said, okay, well, I know more than most, maybe all of these guys right now. And so I felt that responsibility to speak up more from the music platform. And so that's the thing that changed for me was I just took the advocacy and really pushed it more into the music space. Yeah.
Standing publicly with Israel has become increasingly controversial. People are kind of dropping left and right. But what does it cost you personally? Have you lost any friends?
Mm.
Maybe take us through that.
Yeah. I've lost some friends. I mean, what it has costed me is I'm grateful that, I've always had an ecosystem of very, very close friends. That hasn't really changed. We kind of came up together and we learned some of the same stuff at the same time. There was a kind of like I work with bands. I'm also a composer and I do big projects with orchestras and all that stuff. And so with that, I think just statistically, some people are gonna drop off, and so I lost some close friends from that. The more I spoke up, the more that even just concert series or venues or whatever would either drop me or say, "Well, we don't want you to come play here," and that has happened. And for us personally, yeah, it makes it a little bit more difficult because then you also sometimes, as someone who loves to just perform music and produce and all that stuff, I'm also aware of the fact that when I'm playing shows, it's just me out there. And so that now I'm being like more conscious about what I say and how I say it because, I'm not walking around with security detail all the time, you know what I mean? And things like that. And so, which doesn't change doesn't change the fact that I do speak out still, but it does change, just how I do it just because I got a family. I got to make sure that we're protected and stuff. But yeah, we lost friends. We lost contacts, and even yeah, for me, friends, some family members, relationships. I mean, it's there's parts of it that have really has for me the thing that I don't really see it as a negative. For me, it kind of weeds out, on a personal level, people who probably weren't gonna. rock with you anyway, even if outside of Israel, right? If that's where they stood on that. But yeah, there's been a cost. I think lifelong as well. I mean, we're just kind of used to certain things, but we're there are avenues I think that I probably will never get into. But on the flip side of that, there have been I've had so many amazing opportunities because of it. I've had doors open because someone will check out my music and they find out that, oh wow, you've played in Israel and you have no problem posting about, oh my gosh, like, I'm Jewish, I want to work with you. I didn't, and there's, it just, so those kind of things, you can't really beat that. And I'd rather have that than to, feel like I sold my voice out just to have, maybe more views or, more tickets sold or something like that. So yeah.
How much strength do you get from your father who stands strong? He's unapologetic. Do you look at him and get strength from him as well?
I do. My father, in many capacities, has been a pillar of strength for me, both when from everything. I mean, both my parents, but my father has, in terms of just being a father and how he's raised me. I'm the only son, right? My parents have 6 children. I'm number 2, but I'm the only boy. And the way that the lessons that I remember from him the most have nothing to do with Israel. They're everything to do with my own personal development and growth. The things, the stupid decisions I made when I was, in my teenage years that he walked me through and all those things. I mean, so from the time I got married, I remember he was the first person that right after everything was over, I just ran and embraced him and just cried, and having that kind of unfortunate full circle moment. But the day that my wife passed, he wasn't physically there, but he was the first person who called me. I texted the family, he called me immediately. Same thing. I just broke apart, and he's been a pillar of wisdom for me, and yeah, it's I would not really be able to move to continue like I am right now if I didn't have his example. I've seen my dad push on, having very, very, very tough circumstances that most people will never even know about, the strength that he has to do what he does in the midst of some of the stuff that he's been through has given me the strength to do what I do now and to raise my 2 boys in the midst of all this. So when people say when people tell me that I'm strong, I'm like, yeah, that's both my parents. I mean, and that's our parents in general. Our parents will, you know, our kids, as kids, you're not aware of what your parents are going through. You're like, can I have a snack? Can I have ice cream? Like, we're just asking for stuff. Meanwhile, your parents are battling all this stuff over here and taking care of you at the same time. Yeah, it's a remarkable thing. So yeah, my dad definitely has been a big pillar for me.
Now, there was once a remarkable partnership between Black Americans and Jewish Americans. Why do you think so many people today have never heard of that history? And do you think that those relationships can be rebuilt?
Absolutely. So to your first question, I think a lot of people haven't heard of it because some of that is intentional, I think. I do believe that it's intentional. I think that even the rift that started to happen was exploited and like focused on in the 60s. And this is something that I wrote about early on, which was, there was already within the Black civil rights movement, there was this tension about what direction we should take. Should we go more global? Should we stay local? And so you had more of the radicals wanting to kind of take on the problems of the world, and you had the more not as radical. They were still kind of radical, but still they were like, I think we need to focus on what's happening in our communities. I don't think we have the capacity to really take on what's going on in the world. So there was a split that was there, and the group that was wanting to go more global, that was a group that was became the target of the Palestine Liberation Organization, Yasser Arafat. And so that was when that started to happen. You had these names that were renowned that were just that had made this split that was basically becoming the mouthpiece for the PLO. Right after the 6 Day War is when it first started. There was a whole document with all these quote unquote 31 I think facts about Israel and Jews, and it was just the stuff that people still say today. So some of the same stuff that we hear today started back then. That was intentional, and you had the other side of that who was seeing all this stuff, who was pushing back on that as well. You had a civil rights group in 1975 called Black Americans Supporting Israel Committee. It was founded by Bayard Rustin, and in large part, it was in response to the United Nations resolution that Zionism was racism, and it was also in response to what they saw on the radical side of the Black civil rights movement coming against Israel, coming against Jews. But we hear about that, but we don't hear about the pro-Israel Black American civil rights group. I think a lot of that's intentional. I mean, it was actually because of that that my dad started the Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel, but he found these newspaper clippings in the basement of a library. It wasn't like it was online somewhere. So that's intentional. And then when it comes to the Black and Jewish community, I believe that not only do I believe it can be repaired, I think there's still a lot of synergy there. I really do believe that. We see it on the ground all the time. And I do think that some of the what we're seeing sometimes is being projected. And it's also intentional to project that Black and Jewish relations are completely broken. There's fracturing there for sure. I mean, but what I tell people, what I've been saying recently as well, is that some of it is a misconception of what is the Black community, right? So some people see the Black community as Black Lives Matter. It's like, that's not the Black community. That's an elite, percentage of the Black community that have a loud megaphone. So I get it, because they pretend they position themselves as the voice of Black people, and they're not, and that's not just coming from me. It's coming from people who don't even care about Israel. They're just like, you guys pretend like you want to defund the police. And that's like the vast majority of Black people, 85% of Black people were not for that, right? There was a poll that was taken. All these positions that they take, but they position themselves to be the voice. And so that then kind of creates this narrative that Black people don't like Jews anymore. And that's just not the case, and we see it on the ground. But what we have seen is that there are a lot of Black people who they don't know exactly, they don't have the tools. They don't know how to push back, what to say, or what they can say. And so when we travel, when we do whether it's pastors events, right now we're setting up to do events at HBCUs. What we find is that there's so much gratitude for just sharing the information, like some of the stuff I'm sharing with you now, because they're like, we didn't realize how duped we were back in like how intentional this targeting was to get us to speak up for a cause that is not only, a Jew hating cause, but also a cause that essentially hates us, and so yeah, we see like light bulbs go on. It's just that, we don't have the kind of megaphone that these other groups like BLM have, but we see the movement, we see it going on all the time. Yeah.
If Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. were alive today, what do you honestly think he'd say after October 7th and the global onslaught on Jews and Israel?
For me, I try not to answer that kind of question, because I want to be careful. I definitely want to catch myself speaking for him. But I will, just going on what he's already said about Israel, not just that, there's a small quote that he says, but you know, just 10 days before he was assassinated, he was a guest, he was an honored guest at the Rabbinical Assembly for Conservative Judaism. It was the 68th one. It was March, I think, 25th. And he, him and the rabbi who was interviewing spoke on a whole host of things. But then they took a significant chunk, and you can read it in the transcript. They start talking about Israel. The rabbi asked him, and this is after the 6 Day War. So this is after all the people say, oh, well, if he were alive today, he would condemn it. Well, this was after that. So he would have said something if he was going to. And the rabbi asked him, what do you say to the more radicals, again, because that split was already happening in the civil rights movement, who see the Middle East, I'm paraphrasing, but who see the Middle East through a black and white lens. That's what he's asking him. Who see Jews as white and Arabs as brown, and therefore there's this oppression here. And the first thing that Dr. King said, he said a few things, but the first thing he said right before he talked about Israel directly was that, there are those of us who see a sort of mystique in being colored, and anything non-colored is condemned. And he said, we don't follow that course. And then he talks about how Israel, is this oasis, this brotherhood, democracy, and all that stuff. But it's what's interesting to me is that he had every opportunity to condemn, and he was very outspoken about things. I know lately, and I've been following different people who have been, calling out Dr. King for other things that he might have said. There are things but to me, the fact that he, whenever he spoke about Israel, he was unapologetically Zionist, actually goes against, in a lot of ways, some of the narrative that people try to put on him, that he was trying to uproot the American value, whatever it is. What I see is that he wasn't afraid to. He spoke what he believed. I really do believe that. Even if we may not have agreed on some of his other views, he spoke what he believed, and he was an honest thinker. He was only 39 when he was assassinated. I'll be 36 this year. Like, I'm getting close to his age already, and who knows how his views would have changed on anything else. But one thing was for sure is that he was unabashedly Zionist, and that's just, you can't get around that. Some people try to change that. They try to revise history in that way, but you just can't. He said too many things. He was planning a mass pilgrimage of 500 pastors to Israel before he died. He was writing letters back and forth to President Ben Gurion, or Prime Minister Ben Gurion at the time. And then the 6 Day War happened, and he had to postpone it. And then we know he was assassinated not too long after that, in 1968. But he was planning this tour. He had been before, and he wanted to take a bunch of pastors with him. That you can't. I don't know. You can't get any more Zionist than what he did. In that time especially. So I believe that just based on what he said, yeah, he would be consistent in what he said before. Yeah.
I'd love to talk about your incredible wife. For those who never had the privilege of meeting Olga, who was she and what first drew you to her?
Yeah. Olga, so she was from South Africa. She was an attorney. She did commercial law. And she was also, her father is a parliament member in South Africa. He's a president of a party called the African Christian Democratic Party. We first found out about her family through a panel that he was on, talking about why Israel's not an apartheid state and what he saw in Israel and all that stuff. I'm like, wow, here's a parliament member in South Africa who's like a huge voice for Israel right now. And so my dad reached out to him, and I was immediately drawn to her. I just saw a picture of him and her together. My dad was posting something, and I was like, I walked by and I saw him posting. I said, who's that? Dad, she's cute. Who's that girl? And I remember the first thing he said to me was, she's out of your league, son. That's who she is. But what drew me to her was she was her outspokenness. She did a lot of advocacy. They had an organization called Defend, Embrace, Invest, and Support Israel that she ran. They started it the same year that we started IPSI, and we met them, I think, 2 years after that. We had a lot of core values aligned. There was really a synergy that was there early on, that we knew that at the very least, our families would be working together. We knew that much. I had other ideas in mind, but that's, at the very least, it was our families would be working together. And yeah, we stayed in touch. We were a part of. We wound up overlapping for different conferences, and then we wound up being a part of the same online program. And that's when I really got to know her, and tried my hand at, like, asking her out. I was very unsuccessful for a while, and after some time trying, we wound up, a few months later, I came to her basically, and I said that my intention would be to marry you. I'd like to marry you. And from there, we went from being friends to like a courtship. We got engaged a few months later, and then we got married in December of 2017. And yeah, and that's how we met, and that's how we got together. Yeah.
How has losing Olga changed you? Has suffering changed your picture of God? And what
Mm.
has it done to your faith?
Yeah, losing Olga has, so first of all, so it's been almost a year and a half now. We're about 2 weeks away from the 18-month mark. July 5th, July 6th will be 18 months. It was such a sudden thing. She was sick, but it wasn't something that should have ended the way it did. And it was quick. And I honestly, it felt like I was in a movie, like watching a movie of myself, like in the third person kind of thing. It was so strange. And what it has done for me in my faith, it's deepened it in a lot of ways. I would say in a very ugly way, meaning, I don't know how else to really grieve except to be honest about how I'm feeling, where I am. I have had many moments where alone, where I just tell God what I'm feeling, and how I'm angry. I've been like, look, what, God, I'm angry at you. I'm angry at Olga. I'm just mad. I don't even know where to put it right now. And that kind of messiness for me has helped me to sometimes to sort through what I'm feeling. And other times it just helps me to get it out and it gives me clarity on what I need to do next, in my life. What are the next steps now? I had a moment recently where I was stuck. I wasn't sure. We bought a house together, and a few months after she passed, me and the boys decided to move out and to move into apartment complex. And I was going to sell the house, and we were in the apartments for a year. I still had the house, but I didn't know what to do with it. And I had a moment where I was sitting in my room, the boys were sleeping, and I just began to just cry. Like I just broke down, and I started just saying a lot of things. And one of the things I said was, I started to pray, to really intentionally pray. And as I was praying, I realized that this is the first time that I've prayed like this since she died. I don't remember a time I've, without multitasking, without driving or cleaning, just praying. And I was like, wow, it's been really that long since you've done that. And I realized that, well, yeah, because you're mad. You're still mad at God because the last time you prayed like this was when she was in the hospital and she still died. She still died right in front of you, like, so I guess in my mind, it's like, what's the point of praying? I prayed my heart out, and she still died right in front of me. And so once I realized that, something really broke inside of me. And that next morning when I woke up, I I had a clear vision of what we were to do. We wound up moving back into the house, and we're moving forward now. The boys are that's why the wall behind me is blank. I have not put stuff up on the walls yet. We just moved in, but the direction I get from just being very raw, one thing I've learned is that, you know, God he sees it already. He already knows what you're feeling. He can handle it. There's nothing wrong with saying, "Hey, this really sucks. I hate it, and I really wish you hadn't done this to me." It makes your relationship closer because he can. It's not like he's not a person. He's not going to walk away like, "Well, screw you then." How could you speak to me that? No, he still deeply loves me and my family, and he still has me on, just like he had me on a path when Olga and I met in the first place. He still has me on a path. So part of it is I have to trust that I'm still walking the path that he has laid out for me. It's just I happen to really not like this part of the journey, but it doesn't mean that I'm off the beaten path. I'm just somewhere in the wilderness, not knowing, you know, where to go or where to turn. He still has me. So it has deepened it in a lot of ways, and in a lot of ways it's been strengthening, and being able to also write music and write journaling and to journal and to travel the world even and share my story, share about her, to share about her in Israel. She's buried in close to Haifa. And so when I travel, I just tell my story, but people get to learn a little bit more about Israel just from hearing my story about grief, because it's so intertwined in our love story.
What advice would you give to somebody who is going through, what you went through? I actually have a best friend who lost his wife about 3 years ago in a car accident. What would you tell someone who also went through that loss?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. Really, I think probably what everything you're feeling is okay. Everything. Don't worry about the don't worry about how intense or how harsh or whatever your feeling is. Obviously, we don't want to act on some of those feelings, but whatever you're feeling is there. So you gain nothing by pretending like you're not feeling these things. And if you don't have any kind of friend you feel like you can share that with, then just say it to God. But you got to say what you're feeling, say what you're going through. It doesn't really ease the pain, but it does help you to manage better, because it's too big to try to carry on your own. Don't worry about timelines. Don't, oh, well, it's been this many months, I should be, feeling better. Like, you do what you need to do, say what you need to say, feel how you need to feel, be upfront about it. If you got to take boxing or whatever to hit something, do it. But don't be ashamed of however angry you are, however sad you are. If you're battling depression because of it, those are all real things. And just like happiness, God knows how to help you through those emotions as well. Like, none of those things are too big for God to help you.
What are some things that you're appreciative of today that you probably took for granted before?
Hmm. Yeah, I would say my family. I don't know if I would say I took them for granted before, but I definitely have a much deeper appreciation for my family, for my children, for my parents, my sisters. Just knowing that, sometimes you have this season in your life where you see people dying around you, but it's much different when it's that close to you. Until then, you're like you kind of think this is wouldn't happen to me. This is this kind of thing. Like, I'm not gonna. I wouldn't. Me and Olga went through two different friends of ours who lost their spouses. Like over those 7 years of our marriage. So we would talk about what we think we'd do if we lost the other one, but of course, none of us are thinking it's really going to happen, and so I think, yeah, definitely my family, my community. I love my community, but I would say now more than ever, they've been they've been holding me up. I do a lot of things where I bring people together and we do these different projects, but lately it's been a little bit of the opposite where, they reach out and pull me in and say, "Hey, come do this, come do that." That's definitely been. And then music. I love music growing up. I do music professionally, but it has been one of the lifelines for me now. It's something that actually I have to do. I have to, sit down and sketch and write and then sing, go out and perform and play and all that because it helps me and I see how much it helps others around the world. I mean, I met a couple in London when I played my show after Olga passed. It was a few months after. I was on a tour called Journey to Healing, and I had one of my shows was in London, and I met this couple who I said, "How did you guys find out about the show?" They said, "Well, we've been we discovered your Substack a few months ago, like you just writing about your wife, and we didn't actually know you were an artist until you said I'm playing in London." So we thought, "Oh, we have to come," and then the wife shared with me that she had a big loss in her life, and so hearing the songs and hearing me share actually helped her to grieve and move forward in her grief. And so yeah, it's that has been not just a fun thing to do now, but really a necessity, that I think I did take a little bit for granted before, but now I'm very, very grateful for it now. Yeah.
Now you mentioned that Olga was a strong Zionist, a big supporter of Israel. Did that kind of strengthen you as well, your bond with Israel because of her?
Yeah, absolutely. She was very bold. I mean, Olga Olga was the boldest person in general that I knew, but also when it came to Israel, she pulled no punches. She didn't care who was watching, who was in the audience, who was, if she was in a room full of friends or a room full of foes, like she gave the same fire, the same passion, and it was something that continues to inspire me. I mean, just even thinking of her and watching old videos or just the memory of her, she was unapologetic, and it would challenge me in a lot of ways. It would convict me to have that type of stance as well, to have that level of conviction as well. I mean, when I first met her, that's part of what drew me to her. I was like, wow, she really just, I'm over here like thinking about, oh, what if I lose these friends or that friend? She's like, bye, you don't have to be my friend anymore. That's okay. So yeah, she was bold, and that boldness and confidence, I think honestly is what drew people to her even before they even before she would talk about Israel. She would just walk into the room, walk up onto the stage, and people would be like, "Who is this? I need to pay attention to this woman. I need to sit down and everyone be quiet. Like we need to hear her." So yeah, she continues to inspire me.
What message would you give to young Christians who are afraid to stand for Israel? Nowadays, increasingly, you have media personalities speaking out against Israel. Tucker Carlson, for example. What message would you give them?
Yeah, and this one might be a little bit of a harsher one, but it's time to grow up. For Christians who are afraid to speak out specifically, we should all know by now that being a Christian comes with, and it's in our scriptures as well. There are going to be people who hate us, and it's not supposed to be easy. Jesus says to take up your cross and if you want to follow me. And so if you're afraid to speak up, if you know the truth and you're afraid to speak up about Israel because of that, then you're actually not doing what Jesus is told to do, which is to take up your cross. That's a cross to bear. It is. I mean, I could be much further along in my music career right now. I know that. I know that I'm an amazing composer. I worked with orchestras and different things all over the world, and a great songwriter, and got attention from some people that I would consider my idols, all that stuff. But I know that part of the reason why I'm not as far in it as I would like to be is because of that. They look and they see some Israel post or something and they go, I don't want to be associated with them. And that has to be okay. If your goal in life cannot be to climb ladders, it has to be to walk out whatever mission God gave you. And so if you know what's going on is just rank and foul, and the people who are following Tucker and Candace and all these influencers, and they're wrong, and you choose not to speak out, that's on you. That's something that's going to be it's not going to go well for you. So yeah, we got to shake that off. Who cares? You'll make a lot of new friends, but let's not let these earthly things be the reason why we don't do what we know we're supposed to do.
Now, Joshua, I want to thank you for your time. Learned so much from this conversation. I want to thank you for standing with Israel, Jewish people. How can people find you, find your music, your work, learn more, and stay in touch with you?
Thank you so much, Daniel. First of all, thank you. This has been a real pleasure to have me, for you to have me here and to be here with you. I mean, and yeah, I think so. The best way is my Substack. So you can go to jodavimusic.com and you can find all my music. But if you go to my Substack, jodavimusic.substack.com, I do a lot of long form articles. I write about my grief journey, write about Israel and other things. But I also I keep people up to date on where I'm going to be, and where my music is taking me. So I'd love to, whoever's watching, I'd love to meet you and meet you at a show and connect.
Amazing. Thank you again. I wishing you all the best in the future with a lot
Thank you,
of
Daniel.
to keep going.
Thank you so much.